All right. It's been a while, but I think I'm ready to have another discussion about social networking and ethics. Social networking and ethics will require rigorous ethical analysis for decades to come. So what is a social network? So prior to Web 2.0 standards, there was ARPANET or ARPANET of the US military in the 70s. Also, there was BBS or bulletin board systems, MUDs or multi-user dungeons, which some can see with the dark net and all these other wonderful things that came with the internet. We have some subcultures that have formed which could be dangerous. To control that, yes, we would have to infringe on privacy of others, but we can talk more about that later. So what is Web 2.0? It's user-generated, collaborative, and shared internet content. Largely it is commercial and institutional. They harness the internet for social networking. This sounded great back in the early 90s, late 80s, when it came to fruition for the public use. As I said earlier, subcultures such as the incel movement with Manassian, the gentleman who ran over 20 or some odd people near Toronto, north of Toronto. If you want to look up those the case or that in detail, this gentleman was really messed up from what he was doing online, and he made it become a reality. Some people try to get around the reality part by saying it is all role play, but when role play becomes reality, we can run into some issues and safety concern for the larger public. Okay. When I was teaching in Egypt, there was an election, and during the election, social media was used very much so much so that the sway of the voters, even through text messaging on voting day, through various platforms to get people to go out and vote and say, don't remember us, vote for us today. Well, if you know anything about elections in Canada, you're not allowed to put signs up anywhere near a voting station. You're not allowed to have anybody near a voting station promoting their party. It's part of the ethical boundaries in voting in a free and democratic, fair election. So there's a gray area there that some people might need to look at. There are also harms and benefits, and the focus on philosophical ethics for social media has not quite gotten there yet. Social scientists research usually focuses on human rights or the psychological counts of well-being. Early concerns. Albert Borgman and Herbert Dreyfus were the early writers or philosophical writers on social networking sites and platforms. Albert Borgman, who was heavily influenced by Heidegger, talks about a device paradigm or hyper-reality, which is morally inept. He was stating that it leaves us resentful and defeated, insubstantial and disconnected. I'm not sure if there is the gray area where, yeah, you can get disconnected and it can be insubstantial. But in this perspective, that is its beauty. And in a world citizenship online, that members can share their lives and what they do online and how they live. So everyone can see the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Uh, is this dangerous? Yes, it is. It is very dangerous. It is dangerous because if we do not, say, if you're leading elite are trying to hide something from their society and it comes out online, they might lose an election, gain support for a revolution, or many other things. So what Heidegger would call as technological determinism is our independent driver of social and cultural change in a manner outside of our control. So to create a mass movement, to create anything, this tool, the internet, as we've seen in Canada during the trucker convoy, it was suppressed rather harshly, and social media networking was used to garner funds, to gain support from members of the general public, and to have people go to Ottawa for weeks and protest what was going on during COVID in our country. Okay? So this social hyper-reality, as Borgman says, makes us less mindful and intelligent. I seem not to agree with that because as a tool, especially for children, playing educational films, teaching them their letters and phonetical structure of the English language or any other language, you can do through the television, through an internet connection. My children right now are 4, 2, and 6 months, and they're light years ahead of whatever I was with a strictly television connection growing up. They're already talking probably in our generation, a 10-year-old age, using transition words and comprehending what they're saying and comprehending difficult and complex phenomenon. So yes, that is good for children developing. But when you become an adult and you lose touch with reality, it might be hard to garner if it's beneficial or not. I was hoping to see more effort in the peace movement to try to get people not to fight in wars and to be manipulated by their leaders into fighting in wars. However, that is for another discussion. Dreyfus, on the other hand, says we need risk. And without risk, there can be no true meaning in the electronic frontier. So basically, if you don't have risk, you don't understand true meaning. You're not risking anything. You're just on a computer. You won't face any harm most of the time unless you are watching really bad things or if you are desensitizing your conscience to certain things like violence and trolling and getting people to lose their marbles online. So when you play with identity, you have a commitment and meaning. This can go haywire. Like I mentioned before, the incels and the van attack. uh, liberating your social possibilities, and also cancel culture. If you're ever canceled online or canceled in general, you will know what I'm talking about. That is why I see many people afraid to speak what they believe and what they believe as truth. But if you're afraid to speak what you believe as truth and to engage in constructive conversations with other people of the same genuine thirst of knowledge, then you can run into trouble psychologically. What I mean by that is that if you don't, if you're talking with someone who's just there to mess around with you, you will not learn anything. You will not gain any new knowledge. It's not just matters of opinion. Opinion in the end doesn't really mean much if it's not informed opinion, and if it's not opinion that you are willing to discredit yourself or discredit to your own future opinions. So some people call that the weaponization of social media platforms. People using misinformation, people using many avenues to get around the truth. So the January 6th insurrection in the United States, or almost revolution, had many Americans upset. Okay. However, the American people still believe that the peaceful transition of power was most important, and that insurrection fizzled away. Even without Trump's telling them not to, we can understand that even though some people were very angry with the vote, we must understand that in general, or by and large, most of the people in the United States want a peaceful transition of power in their country, and without it, they would have lost their democracy and would have been not a failed state, but a state that was not stable. And for being the only superpower in the world, it is very dangerous to have an unstable democracy. So there are research in this area, or ethical phenomenon, are direct, indirect, and structural. Direct ethical impacts of social networking activity, just or unjust, harmful or beneficial, on participants as well as third parties and institutions. That is direct ethical implications. Indirect ethical impacts on society are social networking activity caused by the aggregate behavior of users, platform providers, and or their agents in complex interactions between these and other social actors and forces. And then there's also structural impacts of social platforms or networking platforms on the ethical shape of society, especially those driven by the dominant, surveillance, and extractivist value orientations that sustain social networking platforms and culture. So why is this important? Why is it important to study? Why should we be thinking about these things? Aside from our conscience and our behavior, direct impacts would just be the activity of going on to Facebook, whether you just scroll, if you post, and stuff like that. Indirect, on the other hand, would be how these forces interact with one another. Okay? Social actors and forces. But to me, the structural impacts on culture are the most important to me, and where we must understand how this works. If we understand how this works, we will understand how to be safe. how not to get caught believing a lie or being misinformed, or how do I say, believing the lie so your consciousness changes your reality. But at the same time, that is a beauty because everybody is at a different stage of development. They come to different conclusions. Some people are very, very fierce in their assertions. However, learning and educating yourself on how to discuss these phenomenon are important. But as soon as one feels as if they're being misguided, misinformed, or plain right out trolled by others, it certainly turns many to turn off the computer, right? Or to disconnect. However, that is not healthy as well. We live in an age where we must embrace this technology. So how can we embrace the technology if we're not educated enough to know what is the truth and what is not? And if there is truth, or if there isn't truth, or we're just striving to understand this ideal, this goal, these institutions. Okay? So, with having all this freedom online and the freedom to organize, basically anonymously, how can we surveil this for, say, cybercrime, cyberbullying, cyber many things? So, cyber surveillance or video surveillance on the streets can and will make us more safe, but we don't want to feel like we are being bombarded every day or recorded, or feel like we have to be silent, right? My favorite folklore dance for the Serbian folklore is dance from Bosnia, where under the Turks we weren't allowed to have our music, and our music was our feet stomping on the ground. We made our own music with our feet, and the dances would have to take place at nighttime, so when there was nobody outside looking around or trying to report people practicing their culture. Okay? So this is the way it can go extra right. This was even without the internet. Okay? And nowadays with cameras everywhere and surveillance online and through your cell phones, even if you talk about something, you'll get an ad about that product on Facebook sometimes, or if you look at a web page, you'll get ads. Is that correct? I don't know, but it's kind of scary, right? So how do we navigate this? How do we navigate through life knowing that everything we do and say is someone is analyzing or at least listening to? And all I can say is embrace it, right? Embrace it. Embrace that freedom. Embrace the need to talk, to understand, to educate yourself. Because once you educate yourself and are able to write or make a vlog or a blog, you leave a written record. And many people don't understand its necessity, but if you can do it, it's very necessary. Okay? So most of my information that I used was from the Stanford Encyclopedia on Philosophy and the article Social Networking and Ethics by Shannon Valor. It's a great article. There's much more work to be done, and as everyone knows, in philosophy it's never done. We're always adding, we're always thinking, and I say we like I'm included, but I read so much of it. I feel like I'm a we in that one. So uh, ethics and social networking. I think it's going to be huge for time to come. Before they used to just talk about copyright and copyright infringement, but I think it's beyond that. I think copyright and copyright infringement, yeah, okay, but if you fall into my perspective, everything's been said, everything's been thought of, everything's been done. Just the tools we have to get there are different. So as we see our hyper informationalized children these days, uh, they're way ahead of the game. They just have to learn before they're 18 how to manage their time, and then they'll be fine. Time and thoughts. But other than that, ethical thinking on social networking is should be front and foremost on many people's minds. And if you have children, that you should be monitoring them so that they don't get into trouble. Okay, there's so many bad things can go on. We could talk about that for days. But as I said, everything is good as long as you know how to analyze and how to tell a true conversation from a fake one, or a true participant in conversations, than a troll or an agitator and like such. So I thank you for your time, and I hope to post another video soon on another interesting, or what I deem as an interesting topic. So thanks again, and good night.